Hi there, Internet. It's me, Broken Terrain, and I finished my magical mill on the hill. I can't wait to share every little bit of it with you. So come along and I'm going to show you how I did it after the drop. This project took me a long time to get back to. I had a lot of setbacks, and part 3 is going to be full of several setbacks as well. So the first thing I noticed with the first fail water test was that, and this is a failed test from part 2, is that when the water flowed, it didn't flow well across the entire waterfall. So the first thing I did was chop out a section that needed to be a bit more leveled off and then more dramatically sloped. And then I went back in with a Flex Seal paste and applied it with this little art spatula here. And I had hoped that would kind of contain the water. And then while that was going on, I took some XPS foam, carved some steps, and used my pen to go over and do out individual stones. And then I used tinfoil to texture them. And while I was waiting for the Flex Seal to dry, I began to hot glue these steps into place. With the Flex Seal dry, it was time to run another test to see if it held water, if the pump continued to work, and I was going to test to see if it would spin the wheel. You'll notice the little stopper there, the little dropper. That's how I have to prime the pump. I need to push water through the intake and pull it out the exhaust, and I do get it working. You can see the water flowing, but the wheel is not spinning. And when I get up and look, I see that there's water pouring in through the inside. So I've failed in 2 respects here. One, the Flex Seal is not waterproof. I cannot, no matter what I do, make this waterproof with the Flex Seal spray or the paste. And now the wheel isn't spinning. And I'm not exactly sure why this is the problem, but there's a few things I go about doing in an attempt to fix it. The first is to lengthen and aim the outflow of water. My hope is that with the tube aimed at, directly aimed at the paddles of the wheel, that it will force the wheel to spin. I'm pretty sure this will work, but my fingers are crossed. Now I decide perhaps the wheel is too heavy, or maybe it's too difficult to turn, and maybe I could put it on a bearing or something. So I grab an old fidget spinner. I bet we've all got a couple of those hanging around. I grab one of the bearings from the fidget spinner. As it would happen, the doweling I use fits perfectly down the center, and the wheel's about the size of my middle bit of the spoke there. So I decide to glue the bearing down, and I'm going to attempt to glue the shaft to the inner ring of the bearing. And I managed to pull this off fairly well. The wheel spins way better than it did before with just a single nail and washer. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. Now for the leaking problem. One of the commenters in one of the other videos, most likely part 2, because I believe that's when I really started dealing with the leaking issues, they mentioned liquid latex. And, all right. So I ordered a big old jug of Halloween liquid latex. I can't remember what I paid for it. It wasn't very expensive considering the large amount that I got. And I poured it in and I painted it all over like a latex liner. It took a very long time for it to dry. And I've got a picture here of what it looks like. Some of the parts are darn near invisible against the black. They're completely dried, but some of those pockets and pools, it took some time, and it held the water. This particular bit of video here, it had been running for 15 minutes or so. I really wanted to check, and so now I'm here to test the wheel and the bearing along with the flow, and wah 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 wah, more failure. The wheel is not spinning. So I take the wheel off completely, and with the bearing, I try to adjust heights. My first thought is maybe the wheel's just too deep in the water. So I try to bring it up. That doesn't work. Maybe the wheel's not up against the hose enough. That doesn't work. I tried multiple variations. I can't make it work. What if I extend the paddles, I think? So I cut some of my small woodsy shapes so they fit inside the paddles. I glue them in with some hot glue, nothing permanent, and check to see if these paddles pick up the water flow and spin the wheel. Nope. Nope. They don't spin the wheel either. At this point, I am completely broken. I try to craft another wheel. I think maybe the wheel I have right now is just too heavy, too bulky. I build this much thinner wheel with much larger spokes, but I hate it. It's ugly, and it just doesn't look good at all with the mill. So I decide to order some motors. I look for small motor with a powerful small motor. This one came with a little gearbox attached. I bought two, one for a future project if this turned out to be what I thought it was. I'm testing it here with a battery. It is exactly what I was hoping it was. So I grab a USB. I figure I can plug right into that USB strip that I already have inside the model. I wire up the little motor, and once it's properly wired up, and you can flip how the motor rotates, wiring up positive and negative to the different sides. Once I get the one I'm looking for, I run a few tests. It's good to go, and now I have to figure out how to attach it to the wheel and then to the mill itself. And this is another problem, but I quickly problem solve this one. I glue the shaft back to the wheel directly. That motor fits perfectly into the nail hole of the shaft. I'm going to also use one of the bearings, and I create a little bearing mounting box out of XPS foam. I hot glue and wrap the bearing in the motor in two pieces of XPS foam. And my first test, it worked well. However, the rotation was too powerful, and the motor rips out of where it was. So this time I reinforce the build. I use some toothpicks to help hold the two mounts together, and then I put some toothpicks in to help sink it into the wall and mount the engine much better to resist the power and torque, and this ends up working like a charm. Now, while I had been waiting for these little engines or motors to arrive, I had carved out and then did some stone work, so I was a bit prepared. As soon as I was able to get the wheel in and working, I just went right to it. I glued my archway in. I have this really cool little decorative path type archway going down. I have the stairs going up to the door, and then I've got some rough stone like a broken pathway, and I'm gonna add some grass and such to this little area. It's gonna look overgrown, and then I take that squishy white foam, that foam mousse, and I squish it into the corners and things just to blend in where the building had glued into the base. And at this point, I am absolutely feeling amazing. This this build had been a thorn in my side for months. I think the last time I had really put some serious work into this build was early November, and that's when some of the leaking and the wheel issues had occurred, and this really broke my spirit. So when I was able to just jump on this stuff and start gluing these things down, my attitude did a reverse course with this project, and I began to fall in love with it again. I had fallen in love with the building I had made, but all these struggles with the fountain aspect had broken me. So I finally had come around. I wanted to make some trees for this, and so I took some floral wire, some thin gauge floral wire. I liked the thickness or the size of my glue bottle for these trees, so I wrap it around several times. I can't recall the number, maybe 12. That sounds about right, maybe less, I can't recall. But once you have your wraps, you can slide the wraps off, and then you can begin to twist, mostly from the center. You want to leave loops on the end, a smaller loop for your roots and a larger root for your branches. And you can see I have the whole thing twisted up a bit, and now you're going to separate the twists and then separate the separations, and you can continue to do that and just twist the small separations, creating large roots that you can then separate into smaller roots, and you just continue down until you run out of wire. Do that for the roots, and then go back and do that for the limbs, and you get some very cool, very funky looking tree shapes, and the wire allows you to bend and shape the roots and the branches as you see fit. They create a really nice looking little tree. Once you've got it all bent into shape, go back in with the hot glue gun and just cover the whole darn thing in some hot glue texture. You're going to miss some parts, and you're going to get that twisting of the wire that peeks through, and it just really adds a gnarled, really cool, barky texture to your little tree. They end up looking really nice, and I found a great way to thicken your trunks up. You can bury a little bit of doweling in the middle of some of that twisted wire, and that's a great way to kind of thicken a tree trunk up if you like this technique. I apply the trees. I put down 3 of them in spots that I think will look really nice for the trees. My idea being that I want each side of this mill to have some really cool visual interest. Clearly there is one side in particular, the side with the wheel, that will get most of the viewing, but I also want the back side of the mill to look interesting as well. I decorate with a few crates that I had earlier crafted and prepared for this very piece. And then it was time to do white PVA all over the base, just a healthy squirt all over the board, and then take your brush, spread it evenly around, and then I'm going to drop on my craft sand. And I'm using a craft sand. It's like 2 types, a finer sand and a little coarser sand, and it really creates a great texture. Then it's on to painting. I'm going to grab my elephant gray and just hit all of the stonework, all of those really cool carved bricks, and the sides of my mountain as well. With the stone all done, it's time to paint my ground with Mississippi mud. I absolutely love this color, and I put it on my ground before I do my flocking. Figure if the flock comes off, you got muddy ground underneath. You can't go wrong. Then I'm going to grab burnt umber, and I'm going to paint all my trees and tree trunks and roots, and I'm going to paint my crates with this color as well. Now, why I have burnt umber on my brush, I decide to hit a lot of the little stones in the walkway, and of course I'm going to hit the stones with an additional 3 colors: honey brown, flamenco red, and khaki as well. And these four colors interrupt the slam of nothing but gray. They add great little pops of color. It takes a little bit of time, but I highly recommend it. Of all the things I did in this project, some of them I wouldn't recommend. But definitely painting your bricks. I love doing it, and it just adds a fine level of detail. And then I'm going to hit the whole darn base with my homemade black wash. I'm running low, but I had enough. Thank goodness. I don't know what I'm going to do when I run out. I love the way this wash makes everything look. It sinks into the cracks and crevices of the stone, and everything just pops. And then I'm going to grab my granite gray and give everything a dry brush, hit those edges, lighten things up a little bit. Man, these gashes and gouges in foam really, really begin to look like stone after a wash and a highlight. Fantastic. I'm going to get all that stonework with a nice dry brush of the granite gray. With the paint dry, it's time to flock again. Pull out your white PVA glue, spread it all around, give it a nice healthy coat, and get into all those places where you want your blended turf, and then just drop it down. I did my best to keep it out of the water pathway. You'll notice I'm not flocking or painting the latex in the water. I just don't know what the water will do to everything, so I've decided not to bother. So with that in mind, the blended turf everywhere grass and ground would be, and once that glue dries, I go in with a watered down glue and I hit all of the turf with it again, and this just locks everything in place. I really don't want this thing to shed. And then more glue on top of the blended turf, and this time I used my static grass. I used my homemade grass with some very bright spring grass that came with an applicator, and I think I would like to try to use the applicator again. I'm going to look for some other static grasses. I didn't like just the spring grass that it came with, but my homemade rope grass doesn't work with it, so I'll pick some up, and we'll check it out in the future and see what happens. Now that the grass is dried, I'm gonna go on to my clumps, my clump foliage. My goodness. And I'm going to hot glue lots of clump foliage down in random spots and just really add some dimension to all of this turf around the mill. And then at the ends of my tree trunks, I'm going to put down some hot glue and just put lots of the clump foliage down. And this is going to look like clumps of leaves and growth on the trees. You glue some down on the top, and then later you come in with a little hot glue and glue some down on the bottom to completely hide the armature of the tree, and it ends up looking really good. I raided my wife's art room for some for some flowers, and she doesn't mind though. She really likes the way this turned out, so I don't think I'm in trouble. But these flowers, they went amazingly well with this project. I was able to put these little beautiful white and red flowers all over. It's delightful little pops of color. They look really good scale wise. I was really happy. I've got a little bit of pink and purple in there as well, but the white and red flowers are what really worked well for this project. And then my daughter, coming by and watching me make it, decided I needed to do a vine up the side. And well, why not, right? In for a penny, in for a pound. So I grabbed some hemp rope. I pull out most of it, keep a few bits of it, and then kind of rewind and hot glue them up the edge of one of the buildings, and then slowly one piece of twine at a time, I branch it out along parts where I think the vine might have taken hold, and I glue it all the way up the wall. And then I emphasize it with a couple leaves from those flower packs that I pilfered from my wife's art cabinet. And then later I would go in and glue some flock along the edges and really blend the rope in, paint it, hit it with the wash. And then I take a watered down Mod Podge, matte Mod Podge and water, and just give everything a nice good coat. The clump foliage, most importantly, particularly in the trees, and then all of the flocking and ground cover. Just everything gets a nice coat, dabbing in the glue and water mixture so that everything holds down. And it is done. And I am absolutely thrilled. I feel a weight that I finally got this project done and completed. But not only that, I'm genuinely really proud of this piece. It's beautiful. And I know there were some things I could have done differently or better, but man, oh man, I am really excited. And here we see the maiden voyage. It's all put together. I've poured the water in. I've turned it on. It's not blowing up. I didn't pop a fuse. Everything's working. It's not slinging water. I was really afraid the engine was going to be so powerful it was going to sling water. It is not. A couple squirts with my eyedropper to prime the pump, and then the water begins to flow. Oh, I did it. I did it. I'm pretty proud of myself. Anyway, if you've made it this far and you like this magical mill on the hill, please hit me with a like. If you want to see more stuff like this, smash that subscribe button, and you'd really help me out if you took this video and you shared it with friends and family, people that you think would really dig something like this. I would really appreciate it. It would help me out. If you want to further help the channel out, I've got a subscribe star down below. If you subscribe, you get access to my pen and paper RPG game and a bunch of templates as well. Every little bit helps. I would really appreciate it. I've got a Teespring shop with some designs that that would really help the channel as well. I would appreciate that. And other than that, I'm just really thankful for everyone. Thank you for watching. Man, I'm super excited about this project. Thank you so much, everybody. Like each other, love each other, and craft on. Are you still here, checking out the mill? Then I've got a fun treasure hunt for you. I've hidden 4 cool little things, little bits about the whole video. Can you find the owl, the potion, the magic book, and the axe? Let me know in the comments if you found all 4.